it leaves a hole. But of course, they're remembered by a lot of people. Remembered and honoured. Honoured because they made the ultimate sacrifice. She was like an absolutely wonderful person. She was. I'm not sure that came out right how I said that. She was an absolutely wonderful person, no doubt about it. Yeah, she was. But he was a really nice bloke. And yeah, I miss him because he was at the end of the day my mate. You lose a mate, there's a massive hole left there.
Hello and welcome to the Lights, Camera, Combat podcast. The podcast where we speak to incredible individuals with a life in connection to combat and shine a light on it. From veterans turned TV presenters, incredible athletes and World War II veterans, we'll be speaking to people who will help me and hopefully you find the light at the end of any tunnel. In today's episode, I'm sitting down with the amazing Ken Hames, MBE. From being a veteran in the SAS, the Royal Marines and the Parachute Regiment, to being a professional explorer and expedition leader in some of the country's biggest TV shows, there isn't much that Ken hasn't done, from his army days to his relationship with Princess Diana to his days leading some award-nominated television programmes. Now, that story doesn't go without its hardships. It's got its highs and it's also got its very low lows, and Ken reveals all of these, some stories for the very first time. It's an incredible episode and I hope that you will get as much from it as I did recording it. Now, we made the most of the lovely British weather we were having at the time and recorded this episode outside, so there's some natural noises, the birds, the bees, maybe a couple of aeroplanes that you'll hear going over, but it adds overall to the very calming ambient atmosphere of the episode. Now, it has been a little while since we've had a YouTube video up on the channel and I apologise for that, but there is a lot coming over the course of the summer and we've been very busy putting a few different things into place to get ready for that. And there probably will be 2 videos dropping on the channel next week. Across the course of the summer we'll be throwing out some bonus episodes, a collection of some of the best stories from the episodes we've already recorded this series. Next week we will be dropping the first episode of that on the channel, the first bonus episode, which will be some of the scariest moments that any of our guests have encountered over their lives, and all thrown together into a compilation video. So that will be a really, really worthwhile listen, with some very harrowing moments being brought up from the Second World War right up to Iraq and Afghanistan. And then we will also be dropping at the end of the week a little teaser ahead of the very first fundraising challenge that we will be doing. It will be completely breaking down the fundraising challenges we've already spoken about, and it will be giving a proper deep dive into what can be expected from the different types of content that we will be putting out on this channel over the summer. Some adventure and entertainment videos all for you on this platform right here. They'll also be thrown onto our podcast platforms as well, but the videos, the YouTube videos that we will be making will be the place to be, the things to watch. So keep an eye out for that. Next week there'll be a lot of new content coming. But for now, let's get into this episode with Ken Hames, and wherever you are, however you listen, enjoy this episode of Lights, Camera, Combat. Military veteran and TV presenter, Ken Hames. Welcome, mate. It's an absolute pleasure to have you on the podcast. It's been a long time coming, this one, but it's been a pleasure actually being able to get to know you over the last few months, so it's great to be able to sit down and do it. First and foremost, how are you?
I'm okay, thank you very much.
Good,
yeah.
Good.
Still rocking and rolling.
That's good to hear. Firstly, I want to actually start by throwing a few things at you before we actually get into anything. Over the course of your career so far, you're one of the very few officers in the British Army to have worn the red beret of the Paras, the green of the Royal Marines and the sand of the SAS. You did 9 tours of Northern Ireland, were involved in the liberation of Port Stanley in the Falklands, the First Gulf War, and commanded Britain's anti-terrorist team. You've also then switched up careers majorly and presented TV programmes for BBC, ITV, Channel 4, Channel 5, CBBC, Sky, the Discovery Channel, amongst others, including one of those working with Princess Diana. When you hear all of that, how proud are you of the career you've had so far?
Yeah, I am proud of it. It was very varied,
Yeah.
as it suggests. I guess I was at it, quite a long time. I joined as a boy soldier, really. What were called then the Junior Leaders Regiments. They were scattered across the UK. And everything from infantry junior leaders regiments to Royal Armour Corps, which was me because I was a tanky originally, and everyone had junior leaders, and it's such a shame that those junior leaders regiment locations have disappeared because they were a great recruiting platform, and were training the leaders of the future army. So I started off there, and then by some accident, someone said, do you fancy becoming an officer? And I think I sucked my teeth a bit at the time because I was, a northern lad from a Derbyshire hill farm, thinking about, other things at the time. But yes, and I was lucky. I got into Sandhurst, joined my dad's old regiment, the Queen's Regiment. Which then later became the Princess of Wales's Royal Regiment, and in between, served in various units and brigades, and eventually in Special Forces.
So let's take it right back to the beginning. You mentioned growing up in Derbyshire, and you just touched on your dad there in terms of regiments and stuff. What was childhood like in your household?
Dysfunction, I would say. It was like a bit like Last of the Summer Wine. A bit of that, a bit of the Larkins. I think life revolved then around seasons, really. It was curious. Winter was when everybody hunkered down because there was kind of not a great deal of productivity on the farm. My granddad's farm, and all the animals were tucked in bed most of the winter, and it was cold up in the limestone uplands of Derbyshire. It was cold there, 1,000 feet above sea level, a lot of snow in the winter. But we sledged and threw snowballs and, did that kind of stuff as kids, and the school bus didn't turn up and all that. So, for some people, when they look at where it is, a little village called Tissington, which is near Ashbourne, on the edge of the Peak District. It looks idyllic. You think, crikey, what a wonderful place to grow up. But I think my dad, he suffered he was a veteran of the Second World War. He was full of bullet holes, he leaked like a sieve, he had recurring malaria. He came from a kind of Scottish Presbyterian background. His grandparents brought him up, and they were the kind of people who probably said that children should be seen and not heard. But he went to Burma, pulled his teeth out, caught malaria, and he suffered. He suffered from PTSD, I believe now. Although when I was a boy, PTSD wasn't invented. So everybody had to have the stiff upper lip and kind of not talk about these things, which he didn't talk about it a lot.
So did he speak about what he did in the Second World War? Or?
Sometimes. I mean, he loved anecdotes, he loved geography, he loved telling us about the Khyber Pass and various other kind of operations he was involved with. Burma, of course, was a dark time for some of those people. They suffered in the jungles there of Malaya, and I think the Chindit Army, the Forgotten Army, they were often called Slim's Forgotten Army, General Slim, and I think he was sent to India then and was part of the Indian Army up in the northwest frontier, and that's where he finished. But yeah, so the household kind of suffered from that a bit, and my mum, was pretty much the breadwinner as a nurse. She came from Yorkshire, and yeah, my sister Carol and I, the youngest two of the four children, Yeah. I used to escape into the great outdoors. I used to run off into the hinterland. That's probably why I love being in the great outdoors so much. It was my sanctuary in a way, the woods and the fields and all the rest. But anyway, yeah, it was a pretty chaotic time. Let's put it that way.
And so, how did you transfer then from childhood? Obviously, your dad being in the military is obviously a big connection. But how early did you see that as the path you wanted to go down?
Quite an early age, really. I was lucky enough to be given this wonderful pamphlet, and it was a pamphlet. It was like a glossy magazine, which said, right, these are the various ranks in the military. Here's second lieutenant, here's this, and I thought, oh, maybe I could do that. And I originally applied to go to Welbeck, which was the Army Sixth Form College, because Dad thought it would be great if you were an engineer, or you were, the Royal Electrical Mechanical Engineers or Royal Engineers or something like that. But I tried to get in, failed miserably. Failed at school pretty miserably. So at 16, I decided, no, I'm just going to join the Armoured Corps.
And so, what was your relationship like with your dad then? Obviously, kind of following in similar footsteps, but you say there were the effects of what he'd seen and what he'd done in the war. How did that affect your relationship with him?
Well, I think he was very proud that I was going to join the military. I mean, he wanted me to be an officer, but at that time, I didn't have the capability. I wasn't academically good enough to get into Sandhurst. But I think he was really pleased when I joined. And I think he understood how difficult it was for me suddenly launching out of a Derbyshire hill farm, very much countryside environment, into this military establishment down in Bovington. It was in Dorset. But I think he was pleased, and kept a close eye on how I was getting on.
What was the training period for you like then? And you sort of touch on the big change it was to go from sort of farm countryside life. What were the biggest adaptations that you had to get used to?
I think the biggest one was just meeting young men from very, very varied environments. I came from this countryside environment, and there were people from the back streets of rough areas of Manchester and Newcastle, places I'd never been to. In fact, I think I'd only been to the seaside once when I was a young kid, to Skegness. I think that's as far as I got. So my geography was really poor in terms of, and some of these young men were really tough, fight their way up through the streets, and and I was not. So that was a bit of a shock to the system. So
do you think that helped in a way?
No, I don't think it did. I wish I was tougher then than I was, because I think I used to get taken advantage. I was very gullible, very naive, and but it was great because when I got to junior leaders, I discovered things like full-time rugby, full-time adventure training, outward bound, all sorts of things. Then started to mould me.
So what was that? What was the training period like for you? Did you enjoy it?
Aspects of it I did, yes, I did. There was a lot of growing up to do, a lot of thinking about being self-sufficient, apart from working in teams, obviously, but the self bit, as I say, gathering that self-confidence to be able to operate on your own and sort your own kit out and be ready to do whatever the bidding was. I think I did enjoy it, and towards the latter part of it, I really started to then accelerate, I guess, to what they recognised as a potential leader.
And so, what was the time frame between you finishing training and you having to go out onto your first tour? How old were you then?
Oh, I was barely 17 and a half.
On your first tour?
Well, we went to Germany. And we were part of the British Army of the Rhine. and there I was in a tank. I trained as a tank gunner, and we trucked around Germany with our 55-ton Panzers, wrecking everybody's gardens and crops, and going up to the Russian, or what was then the East German border, and pointing our barrels at them and saying, "Here we are." So much irony involved in that time when we had the Warsaw Pact, and we then what's the word? We just stayed in West Germany as a deterrent, but quite often when we got to the border with East Germany, the East German guards would come down from their towers and come and chat to us through the fence, and then we throw them rations over the fence because they hadn't been fed.
What was your perception at the time? Do you remember sort of thinking that something more was going to come from that, and maybe an escalation, or was it just kind of dealing with it as and when it happened?
I think we were very aware of the power or the size of the threat over the other side, whether that be in East Berlin, because obviously there was a corridor into Berlin and Berlin was split up, whether it be East Berlin or whether it be the border, between the Warsaw Pact and NATO, because we were literally facing each other across that fence line, and tank traps and mines and all the rest of it. But you were very aware of the size of the threat and the capability of what they used to call the first operational echelon, which in Russian doctrine would probably get wiped out, but then the second operational echelon would roll over the top of that. And I think we all were very aware that they would probably use chemical weapons. That was in their tactical doctrine, and that we'd be facing an NBC battle, a nuclear, biological, chemical battlefield. And we all trained hard for those scenarios. It had bumbled on probably for years and years and years and years and years, and people say, "Oh, they're never going to come." But I think when the Warsaw Pact dissolved, and they discovered in East Germany all these underground bunkers that the Warsaw Pact had built, the Russians had built, or the East Germans had built, they had planned. They had planned to come.
Yeah.
They had actually put the infrastructure in place to maintain that kind of non-permissive battlefield. Whether that be tactical nuclear weapons or biological weapons or whatever they were going to throw at you. They had prepared those positions, so they were a considerable threat at that time.
And one thing I read, which is absolutely fascinating, is one of sort of the last standing, most well-known, recognised Nazis at the time, Rudolf Hess, was obviously imprisoned, and you had some sort of guarding role. Is there something that you had to do with that?
Yeah, the unit had, all units in Germany had a commitment to guard Hess. So from time to time, contingents would go down to Spandau, as it was called, in Berlin, and guard Hess. And obviously, from a political point of view, the Hess was like a foothold, wasn't he, for everybody? Everybody had an interest in Hess, so everybody guarded him. The Russians, us, French, and rotated around guarding him. It was just a very curious part of history where just one man had this huge focus, sitting in Spandau prison in Berlin, there were so many aspects of Germany at that particular time that were quite bewildering. The border was bewildering. This incredible space, for a young man like me, suddenly you hit somewhere you couldn't go any further. Can't go that way, that's the enemy over there. Going to places like Belsen, which was liberated by the Canadians and the British some 80 years ago now.
Yeah.
Going to visit that, going to visit Dachau, another concentration camp. Just being around that whole change in Germany, and eventually I was around, when the wall came down, and just seeing how Germany had to adapt as a nation across all those years, there were people in the north who still hated the British Army because they saw us as the kind of flag-waving bit of the United Kingdom that bombed Dresden.
Yeah.
I remember talking to people in North Germany who were nowhere near Dresden, but they still had that kind of, mixed feelings. Had relations who died in the war, and it wasn't over-friendly. It weren't over-friendly. And then you go down to the south of Germany, where we went skiing every winter on what was called Exercise Snow Queen, and off everybody went down to Snow Queen, and then you were in Bavaria, kind of the epicenter of Nazis, and the SS, and blonde-haired, muscular men marching across the mountainsides. All that history, was all running around in your mind the whole time, trying to make sense of it all, really.
Yeah, and it's such an interesting point, actually. I created, and you're aware of this, and it's something that we're going to be putting out onto the channels, is a documentary that I did last year with a Bomber Command veteran and somebody who was involved in the Dresden campaign, and it was something that even he, at that point, couldn't, and this was, last year, 80 years on, it was something that he couldn't actually sit down and pinpoint whether or not he thought it was the right or wrong thing to have done, and sort of moral compass and everything like that. But do you think that it's different now? We sort of sit here now and can look back on this stuff as history 80 years ago, and people like Hess or whatever, and you kind of look in hindsight. But as you say, that time wasn't that long ago.
No.
It was kind of, the aftermath was going on at the point when you were out there. Do you think that people can't now understand maybe what it was like in that transition period now, because we're sort of so far removed and that's almost been blotched out a little bit?
It's curious, isn't it, because history repeats itself. I think people of my age are very much reminded of the period I've just talked about, when, between kind of 45 and, when was it, 73, when I first kind of arrived there. All that kind of history stuff was still around, the breakup of Germany, the Warsaw Pact, and, all those concentration camps, and all that stuff was there. And now we find ourselves kind of probably wishing we hadn't disbanded British Army of the Rhine, that it was still there, and we still had, 50,000 men in Germany. 50,000, it's a lot. 14 or 50, whatever it was, full tank regiments, and all the infrastructure that went with it. But I think it's just about still memorable, although the younger generations now may not quite get the same feeling of threat that I certainly feel that we're facing now. And that threat is multifaceted. Just taking Southeast Asia and China and the South China Sea and all that stuff out of it for a minute, just Europe, and the ability to destabilise Europe, and countries like, Latvia, Estonia, and I always think to myself, I wonder how many Russians still live there, or people who have sympathies towards, how difficult or easy would it be to cause political disruption in those Baltic states and Finland, all those people who are actually on the front line.
Yeah.
Mind you, when you look at countries like Poland, who obviously have a border with Belarus, they're so stoic. They're so stoic. They fought with us in the Second World War.
Yeah.
They are totally prepared to fight tooth and nail, because they've seen what's happened with bloody... they've seen what's happened with the Ukraine. Yeah. They don't want that.
Do you think, sort of to then just sort of touch on moving forward to now, do you think that your past and the stuff that you've seen and the places you've been is perhaps what gives you the perspectives and outlooks that other people can't see?
Well, yeah, I suppose in a broad sense, yes. I mean, people say, warfare's moved on dramatically. We're now looking at cyber warfare. We're looking at drones. We're looking at the delivery of battlefield munitions by proxy. Sitting on the end of a cruise missile, a drone. However, what Ukraine has demonstrated is that the confrontation battle will still occur, because if you're going to take ground, you have got to occupy it in order to raise your flag or whatever you're going to do when you've gained it. So my take on it, and it might sound simplistic to some, is that you've got to be prepared. And we've so hollowed out our armed forces over the years, and everybody thought, Gorbachev, Perestroika, Glasnost, all those things came in, and we're being bombed. But all those things came in with Gorbachev, and then there was this huge peace dividend, and everybody thought, Russia's just going to be its own country. The Warsaw Pact broke up. The imperialism disappeared to some extent, although we're still rumbling on with old members of the KGB or whatever, of which Putin is one. And so we kind of took our foot off the gas in a sense. I think NATO did as a whole. GDP went down, the spending on defence. Although, we still continue to develop good munitions and capabilities. For all the criticism, HMS Prince of Wales is probably the most powerful warship on the sea at the moment, being escorted by a number of destroyers and what have you into the South China Sea and up through the Taiwan Strait or wherever it's going, with 37, grade 5 fighters on it. That is one powerful warship. So the messages are out there, if you like, the throw weight of intent, but the bit that's missing for me is the infrastructure that supports something that you need to sustain. And we always know that the logistical tail will wag the operational dog. If you haven't got ammunition, if you haven't got water, if you haven't got rations, what's going to happen? You know what's going to happen. You're going to grind to a halt. That's been demonstrated in Ukraine. There's been units there just run out of ammunition. They can't go any further. They've either got to go back or hope for the best. And we're in, I think, our armed forces, are vulnerable at the moment, because I think the logistical element is not there.
So, to get back into your time within the armed forces, what was it Ireland, which was your first tour that included sort of? Yeah,
it would have been definitely. It was an operational tour. Yes. Although you could have argued that Germany was an operational tour in a sense. I think we've just been there so long, people forgot about us. But it was an operational tour in a sense. We had live rounds and all the rest of it. At times. But Ireland obviously clearly in everybody's lens. Actually I really enjoyed going to Northern Ireland. The people were great, actually. The people were great. Even the people, I say even the people, it was a place built on bigotry. Between two sides of the political and religious divide. Prot versus Catholic, basically. And the Catholics, which I think I'm right in saying, our original deployments for Northern Ireland were to protect the Catholics. Cups of tea being bought out by Catholic women, for soldiers on the streets. So the people were great, and they are great from both sides of the political divide. Some hate the Brits, as they call them, because of the history. And you only have to look back through history to see that there were times in Ireland's history where we gave them a real drubbing, and cruelty and stuff like that, things which were politically expedient at the time, but horrific in terms of the suffering that it caused. So there's a deep-seated hate of that, deep-seated mistrust, and despite us being the peacekeepers and trying to maintain the law. Fundamentally, we deployed to uphold, defend, look after the Royal Ulster Constabulary at the time. That was our role, and clearly we had intelligence agencies set up and trying to find out who the baddies were and bring them to justice. Complicated, very, very complex.
Looking at 9 tours then of Ireland, how did it change from the state of play, tour 1 to tour 9?
I mean, there were tours which were quite, depending where you were. Sometimes we were on what we called a 2-year tour. So you were established in a barracks with families. My children went to school in Northern Ireland. Yeah. So that was a 2-year tour. There were various camps that did that, and then there was what they called the Banner kind of 4 or 5 month tours, and they were probably in places that were a little more controversial. Let's put it that way, like Crossmaglen. Parts of Belfast, parts of Londonderry, and predominantly we have these forts set up all over the place, and we worked out of these Wrigley tin forts.
Yeah. Were there any close calls for you personally in Ireland specifically first?
Yeah, one or two. I wouldn't over-egg it. There were times when we got shot at. There were times when there were bombs. There were times when there were riots. But we were pretty big units. When we deployed onto the ground, we would be, sometimes company strength, 100 people deploying onto the ground, perhaps to surround a bomb while it was diffused, while the ammunition technical officer, Felix as we used to call him, would go in and sort that bomb out. Some of the confrontations with the population, whether that be, sometimes we had confrontations with the Protestant side, and sometimes we had confrontations with the Catholic side. Some of those got very heated. People got injured. People got blown up. People got shot. A lot of people got injured. In the countryside, it was particularly dangerous because people put bombs in culverts.
Yeah.
Terrorists put bombs in culverts and trying to blow RUC policemen up.
Yeah.
Or there were threats against off-duty Royal Ulster Constabulary policemen, and you're dealing with a very complex situation, and it was going 24/7. It didn't stop.
Yeah.
It just kept going 24 hours a day, and it was, it taught the British Army as a whole some special skills, though, I think.
Yeah.
And of course, as generations move on, some of those skills may have been forgotten. But certainly the awareness of improvised explosive devices, which we took that awareness into places like Iraq and Afghanistan, and trying to combat people getting blown up by mines or booby traps, as people would call them. We took all of that knowledge forward. Do you know what? I think we did a really good job in Northern Ireland, I have to say. I mean, I was there toward the end of it, and I think we did a cracking job. The troops were brilliant on the whole. They were great at talking to the local population, and I hope that in many areas of Northern Ireland they didn't see the brutality of the British soldier. They saw the kindness of the British soldier, the understanding, the willingness to put their life in danger in order to prevent, factions of the population trying to kill each other.
Yeah. So you're actually the first person that I've spoken to with any Falklands and Gulf experience. Talk to me a little bit about those, because obviously there are times that, for me as a 21-year-old, fall out of my lifetime, but probably times that, considering we've not spoken to anybody involved before, is probably what a large portion of the audience would remember.
Yeah.
What were they like, and what were the big sort of differences between the two?
I mean, the Falklands was a very long way away from the UK,
Yeah.
about as far as you can get,
Yeah.
I'll say, without crossing into Antarctica.
Yeah.
Yeah. And of course, we glibly, rather jokingly, call it Margaret Thatcher's away day to go and liberate the Falkland Islanders who had been, taken over by the military junta in Argentina. Quite simple, really. But my gosh, I mean, the Falklands was, logistically, I have to say, ships, aircraft, ammunition, transport. So you're basically shifting the whole of the armed services down, and projecting them some 8,000 miles south to conduct a war on something which looks like Dartmoor, where there's very, very little cover.
Yeah.
Certainly I didn't see many trees. There was a couple around, but near someone's farm, but no trees. Very cold, very wet, inhospitable, and generally unpleasant, I would say. I mean, I went down on the Canberra, which was great because that ship had been diverted from the West Indies with, I think, something like 250 tons of alcohol on it, which was really a bad move probably for troops going to war. But yeah, we went down on a luxury liner. There aren't many people who can boast of that. And then we cross-decked onto naval craft in order before the landing. It's hard to make a comparison between the two. I think that clearly Gulf War One was a massive conventional operation, massive, and again they bought an armoured division, together, and elements of that were commanded by my old boss Patrick Cordingley. Nice bloke, and the Desert Rats and all that history came back, and I think it was a pretty much a foregone conclusion that we were going to prevail there. Considering the amount of armour and tri-service cooperation, the Americans were there, of course, and the whole 9 yards. People might say that historically it set a ball rolling that we should have perhaps stopped a bit earlier, but there was this big fear, wasn't there, that these countries were gaining capabilities that people didn't want them to have in the region, etc., etc. I mean, the stark difference between what I would call, you could say that the Falklands was pretty much a limited operation, a small piece of ground really. However, we did get bogged down there, literally, bogged in and bogged down. I remember towards the end of the Falklands that I don't know where my pack was with all my kit in it. I kind of lost it somewhere. I don't know where it was. I think it was in a dump somewhere. And in the final kind of 24 hours, I had nothing left except ammunition, my toothbrush, a digging tool, and my sleeping bag. That was it. And it was cold. My fingernails had split with the cold. And unbeknown to me, I had really bad trench foot. And I did try, I wasn't a lazy soldier. I took my socks off and tried to dry them under my armpits. But it's just so cold. My feet had frozen, I think, by week 2. I just couldn't thaw them out, even by walking around. And subsequently, when I got back, I went back to Northern Ireland, of course, straight away after a cup of tea and a biscuit. They sent me to Northern Ireland. I came back and I had 2 abscesses in my feet, which probably did cause some tissue damage down there. So it was a hellish environment to operate in. Mates of mine, Special Forces mates of mine who operated down there, and I thought, wow, crikey, they were definitely out on a limb somewhere, and how they survived sometimes I just don't know. Blizzards and cold and ice, and it was a very unpleasant. Could we have hung on? I don't think we could have hung on much longer. As the boss said, it was a close run thing. It really was a close run thing. And luckily, certain things happened, tactical things happened on the ground, which enabled us to gain the high ground above Stanley, and then that was it. They capitulated.
What was, if there are any, sort of standout moments for you across the whole sort of operational tours that you've done, which were maybe the scariest moments, the moments where maybe you were most scared, or the closest to call that maybe you had something serious going wrong for you?
Some of them I can't really talk about because I'd be breaking the Official Secrets Act.
Which in itself is quite a cool line to come out with anyway. So.
Yeah, I think there are times when I've been scared, but not to the point where I peed myself or anything, started shaking, because I always knew that I had a really good team around me, and I think that's what made the difference. People around me in Special Forces were remarkable individuals, quite unlike how they might be depicted on television.
Yeah.
I mean, people don't shout in Special Forces, there's no bawling going on, like you see on these television programmes. That's just utter rubbish. I think my whole time at Hereford, no one ever shouted at me, ever. Just got on with it. But the level of professionalism from an individual was remarkable. That stands out for me, and it is my benchmark. It is the standard that I expect of myself on a daily basis. As hard as that sounds, even as a civilian now,
still is the way that you're. That's
the way that I do it. I get up every morning, I make my bed.
Yeah.
I get up every day. I do what a friend of mine calls 1%. So I do my 1%. So I do my little bit of physical activity. I don't look at my phone for a while. I just get myself prepared for the day. That self-discipline is really, really important to me. People go, well, why do you need to be like that? I said, because I need to be in today. I need to be in present time, not worrying about the past and not looking too far into the future. What are we dealing with what we can see now? I think in this career of mine it had everything: scary moments, lonely moments, sad moments, just all of it. But what really held it together, the glue, is the fabric of the British, the fabric, the ethos of the British Army, the Royal Air Force, the Royal Navy, the Royal Marines, SAS, SBS, all of them. Just that we are bonded by, yes, esprit de corps to some extent, history, cap badge, brand. It's brand, isn't it? By another name. But we're also bonded by a brotherhood, sisterhood that is unique in the world, and we have a huge sense of teamwork, being able to crack problems together, and I just think it might sound an odd thing to say, but there's a huge amount of love inside the armed forces. There's huge veteran organisations out there who meet all the time. So it is a family. The wider service family is a family, and that fabric, the family silver, as you might call it, is the bit that makes it good.
Yeah.
Is the bit that makes it special. Is the bit that it enables it to do to what some people would say is impossible. Do the impossible. Maintain incredibly high standards, whether those be moral standards or whether they be operational standards. But anything out there, this is what I really learned. Morale is the most important thing. The morale of the armed forces is important. That's why, commissioned officers, I used to say to my officers, look, your job is to look after these people. Look after them. You're given the privilege of leading them. Yeah. Your job is to look after them. You're there first thing. You're last to bed at night. Okay? If they need the shirt, you're going to give it them off your back. You are selfless. and that then cascades down through the chain of command. And that sense of care. Yeah, those are the things that really, really stand out for me. Apart from lots of other fun times, and falling over when you've had too many beers, and skiing upside down and climbing mountains and having all that fun as well. I just hope that people say sometimes it's wrong to regenerate the past, but the British Armed Forces aren't past, they're present, and we need to look after them, and we need to make sure we maintain that morale. We need to make sure that they feel well looked after when they're in, but also well looked after when they're out. But the news is just awash with bad news, isn't it? Bad news affecting people's benefits, and and not spending enough on the stuff that our armed forces need to operate with, and you just think this is nonsensical. Give them the stuff they need to do their job. Otherwise they get nervous. Think, is UK Limited really behind me?
So you touched on sad moments actually. I just want to quickly ask a sort of follow-up question on there. Did you personally lose any friends in combat?
Oh yes.
Close friends?
Yeah, I think we all did.
How does that affect you? How?
Well, pardon me, you never forget those people. They made the ultimate sacrifice. Some died later on. Not everybody dies with a bullet in the head. Some people died of their wounds. Some people died of a broken heart. Some people died of their mental health issues. It hits people in all different ways. And you miss them immensely. There was one particular guy I knew, and he was one of the most selfless people I've ever met. Wherever we went, he would always beat me in the morning wherever he would to put a cup of tea in my hand. I used to try and get up early, maybe not that many times if I was honest, get up early and make a cup of tea for him. But also at the end of if we had a grueling day somewhere, he'd always be there saying, "How can I help you?" So he'd put in you first. And it sounds also very dramatic, probably, sounds like a Wild West story this, but he's the sort of person who would take a bullet for you. Now when you have that kind of comrade, they're priceless. I had a lass who worked for me, so it's a very northern expression, lass, a lady, a woman who worked for me with me in Northern Ireland, and she was just utterly fabulous, in every way, and selfless, professional, totally on it the whole time, and when people like that go out in your lives, it leaves a hole.
What happened to both of those, if I'm allowed to ask?
Killed. I can't really go into too much detail with either one of them, and I don't think it's really appropriate. But they both died.
Were you there at the time?
No, I wasn't actually. No. But it leaves a hole. But of course, they're remembered by a lot of people. Remembered and honoured because they made the ultimate sacrifice.
Yeah, absolutely. And so, okay, I want to jump onto this sort of uniqueness about the way that you spent your military career, going through all the berets that you've got.
Yeah.
What made you want to do that? What took you
purely
through?
By accident.
Really?
It was purely accidental that opportunities arose.
Yeah.
Although with the Marines, with the Royal Marines, the Green, my boss turned around to me one day and said, "I'm sending you to Livingston." And I didn't even know where it was. He said, "Oh, it's near Exeter." I said, "Oh, right, Royal Marine Commando Training Centre." He said, "You're going there." And I said, "Why?" "Why, sir?" Because it's UK. No, but no, he said, "You're going there because you're going to do an exchange. So you're going to go from the infantry." And it's an old naval tradition, actually, because certain naval ships going back back into the 1700s had soldiers posted on them.
Yeah.
And if I'm right in saying, somebody somewhere listening to this will correct me, the Queen's Dowagers, well, I think some of the first sea soldiers, around about the same time as the Royal Marines were formed. And so this exchange happened, and I went off to did the commando course. And I think the interesting, that was purely accidental. I got posted there. I didn't volunteer. You're off. Good luck. And then you're going to be there for a month, and then you're going to walk. Thank you. Thanks very much. Great. And then I think post we had a couple of tours in Northern Ireland, post that, Falklands, all that kind of stuff was going on. It was an intense time.
Yeah.
And I suffered from a degree of anxiety. People would call it PTSD. Don't know why really. Maybe it was my traumatic childhood. So there was something that triggered it off. And I remember I was in Northern Ireland at the time with my feet being doctored. Yeah, I was a bit battered at that point.
Yeah.
Battered. But however, I then decided to go to Hereford and join Special Forces. People said, "What?" My mother said, "What do you want to do that for?" You haven't had enough. Yeah, no. You just got you back from war, and then you're going over here. But again, that was an extremely difficult thing to do.
Yeah.
It is the ultimate job selection.
Yeah, I was going to
Like
say
The
selection.
Apprentice.
Yeah. Notoriously challenging selection process. Was it as awful as it sounds?
Well, I think, like all these things, the romanticism kicks in, doesn't it? Into all these stories about it. I'm going to be honest. It's very systematic. So if you arrive there with a reasonable level of fitness, you should be okay. It's long, like that first 5 weeks, and you're continually marching over various mountain ranges with lots of weight on your back and wondering how you're doing, but you just got to keep getting there.
Yeah.
Just be there.
Yeah.
Don't have to be first.
Yeah.
Probably not good to be last, but be there.
Yeah.
And of course the directing staff, who are all proper SAS pods, they don't say very much. Tick you off on a list and see you tomorrow.
Yeah.
For the next exciting instalment of hill walking. I don't want to underplay it. It's physically very demanding, especially the kind of endurance marches. Yeah, they're hard. They're hard, and you need luck on your side that you don't get injured. One of my friends who had to come back, I do firmly believe, he went in with a bad knee and he soldiered through it, and I think by the time he finished, his knee was done in for life. And some people carried injuries. I don't know how they did it.
Yeah.
But probably took ibuprofen by the bagload, and it was sore. But of course, the harder bit was when we had Officers' Week, because I was a captain.
Yeah.
At Officers' Week, where they ask you all sorts of awkward questions like, "Why haven't you got a girlfriend?" Well, you feel like saying, "What businesses are yours?"
Yeah.
But they tried to evoke an emotional response from you.
Yeah.
So Officers' Week was hard. You get any sleep for a week, and then you go off and you do the jungle bit. It's the hardest bit. But I was so lucky because I was already a jungle warfare instructor, so called, whatever that means.
Yeah.
I'd already had experience.
Yeah.
In Belize.
Yeah.
And Belize was an operational tour.
Yeah.
On the Guatemalan border. But that had taught me a lot about jungle skills. So when I went to the jungle selection bit, I was lucky. I'd had some experience. I knew it was going to be hot. I knew there were creeper crawlies.
Yeah.
I knew there were ants.
Yeah.
And all the other stuff that wears you down. And I'll never forget the communal toilet. It's just like something out of a horror movie. I can imagine, But that was tough. And when we got back from the jungle, nobody really said anything. We were all wandering around.
Yeah.
Waiting for someone to tell us what to do. I know I laugh now, but when you think about it, it's quite comical, really. That it's not like you get on a parade square and everybody stood to attention.
Yeah.
It is assumed.
Yes.
That you have enough professional skills to know when to turn up with the right kit, with the right attitude, with your hair cut, shaven, etc.
Yeah.
that's just taken as a given. So there's no need to shout, is there?
Yeah.
And you just get on with the real business. And then, you know, I remember I was wandering around camp one day thinking, shall I go for a cup of coffee, or shall I go and get a ham-baked beef burger over here? I don't know. And someone come up to me and said, you know, you need to go to the clock tower, where on the clock tower written all the names of all the men and women who've given their lives in the service of Special Forces. It is a very symbolic clock tower, because on it it's got those words, for those who did not beat the clock. And they're very symbolic. And of course, a lot of women, you know, historically, a lot given their lives in the service of Special Forces that people forget. You know, going right back to the Second World War. And anyway, so yeah, I got there, and then the boss, the CEO, came, and you know, he had a berry in his hand and a blue belt, and you were going, "Oh, he's going to give that to me." I think, do I really deserve it? It's hard. It's hard. You know, I'm being very honest now, and I can at this age. I don't know whether I was really that good at it. It's a special kind of skill. Hence the name, Ken. It gives it all away. But I'm quite self-reflective about it. I don't know whether I was that good at it, to be honest. You know, did I come out of there, you know, another 10 medals and, you know, instant promotion? No, I didn't. But I enjoyed it.
Yeah.
I enjoyed it, and I met some amazing people. And yeah, it was hard, emotionally, physically. Yeah, some tough times.
And so you came out at the end of your time as a major in the SAS. Is that correct? Yeah. So there then comes sort of a crossover where you go from this long-standing military career and you end up branching into television. A crossover that I believe came about through your connections and relationship, if you like, with Princess of Wales, Diana. Mm-hmm. What was she like?
She was an absolutely wonderful person. She was. I'm not sure that came out right how I said that. She was an absolutely wonderful person. There's no doubt about it. Yeah, she was. She was caught up in you know, the protocols and the way that the royal family had to operate. And the firm, whatever we call it, the firm of the royal family, you know, they have certain things they have to do, things they have to turn up to. There are protocols, standard operating procedures, we would call it in the military. I think some of that frustrated her from time to time, as it would probably other members of the royal family. You know, when you've attended your fourth visit in a week and there's lots of handshaking and lots of this.
What was your relationship like?
Well, I knew her well enough. She originally was the Colonel-in-Chief of the Royal Hampshire Regiment, so we amalgamated. There were lots of Royal Hampshire officers who knew her better than I did and had met her before. My relationship happened when there were two things. One, I was asked to help with this kind of adventurous activity that the young princes were doing at that particular time. That was one of the first times that I met her, and then we did a big expedition which raised money for Centrepoint, where Centrepoint is still there in London, where young people who are homeless can find a bed for the night. So basically it's a hospital. And during that period of time I got to know her very well. We did various presentations, and she came to visit us and visited our training, and it was a hard time. It was a hard time for her because, you know, her and the king were going through you know, their divorce, really, or the separation. So I think she at times felt extremely isolated. I think some of the people around her have not given her the best advice, really. I could be a bit more forceful about that. I thought some of it was just ridiculous. But at the end of the day, she was the mother of the future king. and that set in tablets of stone.
Yeah.
But I think somehow that the orientation of her household and the orientation of her so-called advisors, the orientation of where the royal princes were at any one time, difficult. And very sad story. A very sad story. And of course, when she became our regimental colonel, our colonel-in-chief, one of them of the Princess of Wales's Royal Regiment, where I served, of course. That was a fantastic honour for us, and everybody loved it. Loved having her as the boss. You know. She'd come round, put her camouflage kit on, and stick cab cream on, and come and play with the troops, and everybody loved her. What a fantastic, fantastic colonel to have. But then, of course, we never happened.
Yeah.
And it was a utter tragedy. It should never have happened. So yeah, it was a huge loss. Huge loss to everybody. Let's be frank. Huge loss to the royal family. Huge loss to the nation. But she's a lovely person.
Yeah, that's
kind.
Yeah, that's a very nice tribute to give, and it obviously opened that new pathway for you into television.
Yeah.
How did you find that transition from, the military into TV?
Oh, bewildering. I mean, I got a bit lost. That's why, subsequently did work to help veterans. When I left after, 30 odd years, crikey, who are these people called civilians? They don't turn up on time. They're habitually lazy. I didn't quite understand them. It was hard. Again, a massive learning curve. I think some people adapt to civilian life quicker than others.
Yeah.
I was lucky, I think, that I adapted, and actually going back to SF, I think SF, Special Forces, in a way prepares you better for civilian life because it's less regimented. You work with a lot of other agencies, so that helped for me, communications-wise. And there we were, we did our first expedition with it was Anglia TV, I think it was. We did the first production of what was called Jungle Janes. And we'd done one before that. Of course we had, because we made battle stripes when I was the chief instructor of the senior tactics course at Brecon.
Sorry, only me. I hope you're enjoying the episode so far. If you are, please leave a like, a review, a follow, a subscribe, whatever it is, on whatever platform you're listening to. It helps us grow the podcast and continue to bring you the best guests we can. It helps out a lot. So without further ado, thank you. And let's get back into this episode.
So, in the TV world, you'd probably be most well known for, as I mentioned at the beginning, an absolute vast array of stuff that you worked on. Mission Africa is a big thing, a programme that was successful, and perhaps maybe look at the peak of success, perhaps through the Beyond Boundaries series, which ran for 3 series across the BBC, taking disabled people on different expeditions and sort of proving that the physical disability didn't obviously mean inability to do certain things. What was that whole experience like, being in, the face and the lead of a big BBC series?
It was fascinating to be involved in such big productions, and they were costly. Shouldn't say that, should I, in front of the taxpayers, BBC licence payers, but they were massive. Going back to Beyond Boundaries, for instance, which was before Mission Africa. Transporting 3 crews plus the contributors plus me, expedition leader, presenter, to another part of the world. I think on one occasion, my friend Wolfgang, the production manager, was transporting something like between 90 and 120 Pelican cases, through customs, trying to get this stuff. We went to Nicaragua to begin with.
Yeah.
I think nothing prepared me for just how remote we managed to get ourselves. You know, yeah, you want an expedition? Well, let's go there, right? And I remember landing on the coast of the Mosquito Coast of Nicaragua, and thinking, we've done it here. We've done it here. Moving no more than about 100 metres in the first day. But
did you feel a sense of responsibility, therefore, being kind of, the expert in that situation?
Oh, hugely, hugely. And I think, I rightly or wrongly was not just taking the role as expedition leader, but also the emotional baggage that went with it. Because I think the crew are filming, they're observational in this particular situation, whereas I'm actually looking at the capability of people with disability. Can they actually get through this obstacle that I've put in front of them, or it just is there by accident in this pretty hostile environment? Hard, very, very hard. I lost 2.5 stone.
Really?
2.5 stone, because
is that first series?
First series, yeah. And I think my solution. Well, I've got this lovely picture of me with 2 of them on my back, carrying them over some bog somewhere. I think at great personal cost to myself. Somebody pointed that out to me the other day, that not only are you the narrator, Ken, but you're the expedition leader as well, but also you're the emotional flag to rally to in order to get these people through this exceptionally difficult terrain with wheelchairs and no legs and all the rest of it, blind, deaf, and cerebral palsy. So probably one of the hardest things I've ever done. Yeah, without a doubt.
And I've been able to find some of the episodes of this. Now this whole magical YouTube sphere. So much stuff is out there, so I urge people to go and have a look at it, because it isn't exceptional what these people manage to achieve. And that is incredible. But there are particular moments, and it's highlighted, where you have to be this sort of shoulder, if you like, for certain people.
Cry on you.
And were there moments where it was perhaps slightly frustrating, if maybe, and I'm specifically talking about a specific incident in the first episode of this, and you might even remember what I'm talking about. But there was an instance with one of the members of the crew who was deaf, but therefore perhaps physically more capable. And perhaps maybe to certain members of the crew weren't pulling their weight as much.
Yeah.
Was that a challenge for you to have to maybe keep calm in a sense and keep that sort of level figure when you've got the experience you've got, and you've also maybe got the ability to see you might be more physically capable than other people and perhaps aren't pulling the weight that maybe you should be?
I think you're referring to Charlie. Charlie. But I did recognise that everybody was on a different journey.
Yeah.
Despite us being in a team and having to do team tasks, team tasks first, then sort out yourself as an individual. So get the water, bring it to camp. Everybody gets the water distributed. So there were jobs like that that required the team to pull through, and he sometimes, took a bit of a backward seat. So it was just through encouragement, really, because there was no point. The expedition is a series of obstacles, a series of different environments, and it's the long game, isn't it? It's the long game you're playing here, not the short game, the long game. So quite often I, try and give some encouragement rather than being dictatorial and saying, right, Charlie, get off your arse and go and do that.
Yeah.
I rarely would do that.
Did you learn a lot about yourself then through that process? Because you're dealing with people in these environments that aren't the normal people that you'd have been going through these wilderness adventures with.
You have to adapt, of course. You have to learn patience. And think about the long game. Because you don't know when they will reach that pivot point where suddenly they realise that, I need to do something differently in order to underpin the team as a whole, and to prove to myself that I'm more capable than I think. Because at the end of the day, the ethos is one of opening exciting possibilities for people. It's not just the expedition end that's the important thing. It's the longer game, which is outside of that expedition. So it's about encouragement. It's about empathy. Empathy is a superpower if used correctly. Yeah, I know how you feel, John. It's awful, isn't it? I remember back in the jungle having to go and gather water. Terrible job. Everybody's sitting, having a nice time, and I'm descended 500 feet to the river, carrying everybody's water back up, weighing 60 pounds, getting no thanks when I come back.
Yeah.
It's hard.
Yeah.
It's hard. But it teaches you, I try to say to them, look, these are life lessons.
Yeah.
You probably feel incredibly isolated sometimes as a person with disability. And that's true. A lot of people with disability are isolated.
Yeah.
But it's getting them to reach out and say, look, there are organisations, there are clubs, there are places you can go, there are organisations you can join, some sporting, some more social perhaps, but they're there. Go and take advantage of them if you can.
And I think actually that series specifically is perhaps in a sense slightly ahead of its time when it came out in the way that the world is now, in terms of really shining a light on finding the abilities of people that maybe had been shoehorned into certain categories. But on the TV side of things, do you enjoy being in front of the camera? Do you enjoy that side of life?
Yeah, I did. It has a massive kind of, ego bit attached to it, doesn't it? You're the presenter, you're the talent. You soon realise that actually it's quite hard work because you have to learn your lines a bit and be confident about what you're talking about. Of course, I was lucky in the expedition environment. I did know what I was talking about, and I did know probably what to say.
Yeah.
In other more perhaps historical programmes, you had to make sure your history was correct, didn't you? Because there'll always be someone there saying, that's the wrong date, Ken, that's the wrong regiment, that's not right. Yeah. So you have to be factually correct in those things, and then you did have to learn a script, which is not easy sometimes when you're trying to put it across in a more conversational way, rather than a kind of blurting out history from a textbook. Mission Africa was a very different scenario because we took some young people and they were going to be trained to be apprentices. But some of those young people were, disadvantaged and looking for an opportunity, and that gave them a nice springboard into perhaps a different career. They learned how to be rangers in the Kenyan bush, and my mate Nick Knowles was along with me, and he and I kind of co-presented that. He's a consummate professional as a presenter, so I learnt a lot from him, watching how he operated. He fell off a wagon, 3/4 through and hurt himself, so had to get thrown back to the UK to be operated on, but came back bravely with his arm in a sling to finish off the series. But yeah, you've got to be on it, and going back to being organised, you've got to be organised, and you just think about where the story's going.
Yeah.
Trouble was on Beyond Boundaries, you didn't always know where we were going. It was kind of the line of least resistance, which, you'd look at a track to the right, and that track went round a volcano, and you could see it for 5 miles or so, and that's an easy track, but it's the longest way around. Or shall we just go down into the volcano and out the other side?
Yeah.
That's only 1 kilometre, but we've got to then lower somebody in a wheelchair or on a rope down a cliff. And so those were the sort of choices that we had. And of course the impact on people, chucking them in the Zambezi River to go down the biggest commercial rapid in the world.
Yeah.
Wow, that was off the Richter scale.
Yeah.
Definitely, that was as an experience. And we, it wasn't ad hoc. We had as much safety as we could. We had paddlers in the water. Some of those are international champions in a kayak. That river, they knew it upside, they knew it well. So a tremendous little safety net there, but in risk terms, it was a big risk, and I wondered at that time about impact on the people. Ken's just scared us to death. Of course, they would blame me because I'm the expedition leader, not the television company.
Yeah.
They blame me. Hey, well, thanks very much for that, Ken. And you've then made us sleep in a mosquito-infested swamp surrounded by crocodiles. Thanks for that. And they got pretty upset about some of it. And I said, look, this is the environment we're in. We have to deal with it. So what can we do in order to alleviate the pressure?
Yeah.
I remember one day when we were gathering wood in the middle of Nicaragua, and I said, look, there's wood lying all over the place here. You know, it's not like there isn't wood to put on the fire. So just crack it. You do it for 5 minutes. They're obviously very tired at the end of every day, and the camp chores of gathering firewood and cooking, and they all become a bit of a mountain to climb. And I just leant on a tree. While I was talking, not sing, but actually it was a thing called a sabre tree, which is covered with thorns, big thorns. And I just went, stuck my hand on there. I didn't say anything. I took the pain, but then pulled my hand off and blood spurted out. Moments like that break the ice there, where you show your vulnerability. You just imagine, gather some firewood. Ooh.
Oh, that is absolutely horrible.
But they were tough things to do, and they all were. Nicaragua, Africa, crossing the Kalahari, Namib deserts. Yeah, hardcore. And then the Andes.
Yeah.
That has some real moments in it, especially up at altitude. I mean, we were taking a wheelchair to 5,000 metres above sea level.
Yeah.
Madness.
Yeah, and did it.
But some standout moments of people who suddenly, their persona, their ability as a leader. There was one particular girl called Julie McElroy, who's now a doctor of something or other. Julie run the London Marathon, gone on to some great things. As has Sophie Morgan, who's a BBC presenter. As has Amar Latif, BBC presenter, and probably the most famous of all, Adi Adebatam.
Yeah.
Now a BBC, very, very, prominent BBC presenter.
Yeah.
Adi, one of the bravest men I think I've ever met. Really? His legs knackered by polio, but on a volcano, suddenly turned round and said, "Well, I'm fed up of being pulled and pushed. I'm just going to go up on my hands."
Yeah.
I mean,
yeah.
on ground that's like razor sharp rocks. And horrible. Yeah, tough as nails.
Yeah.
Tough as nails. But I remember him and I standing on the top, him sitting back in his wheelchair by then, I think.
Yeah.
Yes, he was. And then him saying to me, "How are we going to get back down?" I said, "I haven't worked that one out yet."
Did you keep good relationships then with some of the people that you went on these expeditions with? Yeah,
absolutely. I mean, people go on to lead their lives and they go off in different directions and probably don't dwell too hard on the past. They're looking toward the present and the future. So I'd always hoped. Yeah, but I do. I can kind of reel them all off and where they are. Some are better at keeping contact than others. Some have not been perhaps as successful as they might have hoped. It's swings and roundabouts there. But I think I can put my hand on my heart and say, actually, they did get a lot out of it.
Yeah.
It was a good thing for them to do, and they certainly broke down some of the barriers of disability in their own way. I mean, the massive enhancements in disability sport. You look at the Invictus Games, you look at the Paralympics now, get full coverage on TV. It doesn't change what some of the grassroots problems, which are about access, which are about people with disability getting the right allowances that they, in order to, adapt their home or whatever it is. All that stuff's still going on. Yeah. We never seem to be able to resolve these issues, do we? But certainly disability issues, the core subjects of inclusivity, diversity, they're certainly in the public eye all the time. As they should be, to a degree.
Before we bring everything, sort of wrapping everything up and bring it towards a little bit of looking into the future and now, and just touch on present day. you've gone through all these incredible professional achievements and accomplishments, but specifically over the last year or so, personally, you've had a lot of very, very difficult personal situations to deal with, including last year losing your son. Would you be able to talk to me a little bit about that?
Yeah, I think the ground, in a true military sense, the ground as it was at the time, my wife Caroline had cancer. And it was a particular type of cancer which was, quite tricky. So she had an operation, she had chemotherapy, she had radiotherapy, she had all of that stuff. It wasn't going to kill her, and I think now she's in a good place. But when she finished or toward the end of finishing her chemotherapy, first batch of that, I was in Italy, and it's funny actually, I was descending from a mountain and I'd sat in an alpine pasture where there were the kind of brown cows with bells on. I sat on a rock and I said to the people, go down, I'll be down in a minute. And I just wanted to sit there. And for some reason the earth turned. I felt it. I felt the earth turn. It kind of was like some kind of seismic shift. And weird sensation. And I'd had a message on top of the mountain from Harry's girlfriend saying, can't get hold of Harry, don't know where he is, but he was good at disappearing, so that was no surprise. But when I sat down on that rock, I knew he was dead. I thought, I'm going to get a phone call when I get down the mountain, and Harry's not going to be with us anymore. And I was dead right. We got down to the hacienda we were staying in, which was belonged to a friend of mine, Giovanni. And my friend David came to me and said, Ken, you need to sit down. I said, Caroline's on the phone. Handed me the phone, and she told me, she said, I'm so sorry, and he's gone. He's gone. The circumstances around his death were just so complicated, multifaceted. Fundamentally, he had struggled with his manhood. What was he going to do? Who was he going to be? There were so many expectations around him. Not helped by the fact that his dad had those 3 letters after his name, MBE, and all that kind of thing. And he probably thought, God, how am I ever going to aspire to match my dad's achievements? That would have been probably in the back of his mind. He had he had some shoes to fill, but I'd always reassured him and said, you don't need to fill my shoes, mate. Do your own thing. I'm proud of you, whatever you do. And him and his sister, Katie, I gave them, from my perspective, unconditional love. Unfortunately, Harry's mum and I split up. That's another long story, but obviously in a sense that probably didn't help. Although people say, well, lots of people get divorced, it doesn't make their children commit suicide. I suppose if I was to, there are 2 aspects to this. How's it affected me, and how, what's the future hold? Drugs are a terrible thing. There's no doubt about it. Harry took drugs, and Harry dabbled in drugs in ways which were quite unsavoury, and an ex-drug addict friend of mine the other day said cocaine is the worst, Ken. It's just the worst. Oh my gosh. A recreational, lying around sometimes like sherbet. It's just terrible stuff. And it has a whole social kind of trail behind it. And there's that, and then there's gambling. And my father gambled. Too much. And ever since that day, I have never, ever gambled in my life. I wouldn't even buy a lottery ticket because I'm dead against it, because I can see how it ruins lives. And Harry was into drugs and gambling. Those 2 things, the things I hate the most.
Yeah.
And he was in a slot machine once in Manchester you know, when we were at my nephew's stag party, and then I caught him in one of these. I said, "What the hell are you doing?" She said, "You haven't got much money, but you're prepared to chuck pounds and pounds and pounds into this thing, which is just eat it and not give you anything back. See you, Harry. Well done." But he had got into serious trouble. So I think a combination of those things, and also that in 2017 he sustained a brain injury. That didn't help either. So you can see all these forces working against him. You know, he became partially deaf. He had epilepsy, and it all compounded to probably to a point where he said, "I've had enough. I can't take it anymore." Shame, because he was a wonderful, wonderful person. So kind, you know, give the shirt off his back to people. Probably an overactive sense of social justice, but he was a really nice bloke. And yeah, I miss him immensely. Of course I do, because he was at the end of the day my mate. You lose a mate, and there's a massive hole left there. No parent. There's lots of parents who've lost children around, of course, and I speak to them. There are lots of parents who've lost their sons and daughters through suicide. It's a tough gig. My word, it's a tough gig. And here we are, almost a year on, and I'm still grieving. I still feel anxious some days, and I don't know why. That hole will only close very, very slowly. It'll never completely close, of course, but I suppose its effect will lessen over time. It's an awful thing. And of course, I feel for for Katie, his sister, who's a doctor. She lives out in Australia, and it has had a profound effect on her. Her only brother, her only sibling. Tough. But you know, somebody said to me once, you know, perhaps some people are just not for this planet. They're just not for this world. And I think that's possibly true. But I have a manic hatred against people who peddle drugs to young people, get them involved in drugs as either an emotional or physical prop. It's just the devil's work. It really is. See their lives ruined by it. Really ruined. Even down to marijuana, because I had a friend who in Bristol, and one day she rang me up and I said, "Where are you?" She said, "I'm up on Clifton Suspension Bridge." I said, "What are you doing up there?" She said, "I'm thinking of jumping." I said, "Well, hang on a minute, let's go have a chat about this. I'll be there in a minute." So I went up there on my little scooter, and there she was. And luckily it didn't happen. But then I discovered that, you know, she'd been smoking marijuana. And for some people it doesn't work. Some people you just laugh and giggle and fall over and, hey, it's great having a spliff or a joint, whatever. But for some people it makes them paranoid. Cocaine also can make you paranoid. Borderline schizophrenic. So yeah, dangerous stuff. And yeah, if in the future I can do anything to help, educate, help young men, you know, not go down those roads, then I would do something to help that, and maybe that's part of my future mission. Because whether it's men or women, it's about building resilience, isn't it, to that kind of stuff? It's about building the resilience. Where does that resilience come from? Is it a good education? Is it the fact that I've gone to the right school? I'm going to university? But all those things are not, they're achievements, but they're not necessarily building resilience. Where's the support network around some people to help them with their mental challenges? I don't know. Like we were talking earlier on about, you know, whether people would fight for their country. A lot of them wouldn't at the moment. Because they're perhaps too worried about too many other things.
Yeah. Yeah. Firstly, obviously it's very emotional to hear you talk like that, and I'm incredibly sorry for everything that you've been through over the last year. I want to just now focus on the last part of this conversation to the future. What is it that, you know, we personally have over the last few months spent a lot of time talking about, you know, working together on certain projects and ideas. What is it that you're looking forward to, motivated towards? What is it that your future holds project-wise?
I mean, it's a cliche, but you know, the young people of our country are our future, and what it is to be young, let's say, you know, between the ages of 18 and 28, that decade, you know, where are they at? Where are they at the moment? You know, what could we do to highlight their plight or their challenges? Yeah, and why do so many people, I suppose the perception is, don't want to join the armed forces? Maybe they see it as a one-way trip to, you know, Putin's war machine. Maybe that is a perception. But there is something about you know, community, isn't it? Community. I'm not saying nationalism is a right-wing thing, but you know, pride in country, wanting to make our country great, doing stuff together. I mean, I have seen some amazing projects recently where communities have come together. Yeah, for instance, rebuilding the Stroud Canal. And there's all ages in there, from young people to old people to middle-aged people, all working together to make something beautiful. And that's a wonderful thing. People will be going, but that's a long way from the military, Ken. But I think the military, you know, the military offers lots of other things other than just putting on a uniform and having a gun. You know, it's not all about combat. But we do need an effective armed services, and we do need the best people we can get in it. You know, of course we do. It's just a fact of life, and it's never going to go away. But kind of linked to that is, how do we help people do that critical thinking? How do we help them do that? I don't know, but you know, I guess if we can find a way of telling the story or stories, it may in its own small way, you know, help some people in saying, well, you know, here's a group of people who were perhaps wounded, injured and sick from military service. Not a great advert, people say. But you ask most of those people who are wounded, injured and sick, and they say, no, I'd rejoin tomorrow. Yeah. They're not all basket cases, you know, waiting for their payout, sitting in some flat somewhere, gazing out of the window. No, they're out doing stuff. Some Climb to Recovery people, which is a charity formed by a guy called Neil Heritage and my friend Matt Mackay. They've now got wounded, injured and sick veterans, some of which have got amputated limbs, have qualified as rock climbing instructors. I mean, who would have thought? Yeah. Who would have thought? Yeah. Yeah, there's a lot to be gained. There's a lot to be gained out there, but you know, you've got to go out your front door and wear out some shoe leather to do it. Yeah. It can't be done from behind a computer. It can't be done from behind, you know. It can't be done on Facebook. I think social media is a double-edged weapon, of course. Sometimes it's really good. Information arrives at the right place at the right time. People are well informed, but it promises too much. Yeah. It's giving a false sense of I can just grab it, almost grab it out of the screen. I don't have to even leave my chair to earn millions through Bitcoin or whatever you're offered. But really, for the vast majority of us, we've got to get out there and roll the sleeves up.
Yeah, it's very interesting, and I look forward to seeing whatever it is that comes next. This has been incredible. It really has. I've been looking forward to it for a while. It's taken a while to get us here, but it's been a really great chat. So thank you so much.
Ben, you're welcome.
It's been a pleasure.
Thank you.